and welcome back to the George Collection. I'm Rachel Rightside Blonde. I've been watching the CNN documentary about JFK Jr. and it's been pretty interesting so far. I've made a couple recap videos of these last two episodes. The third one is coming out tomorrow night, so I'll be anxious to see how this finishes up. After watching those first two episodes, I wanted to take a look back into the magazines that occurred after the plane crash in July of 1999, because we all know in the magazine business we have to work at least a month, if not 2 months ahead, so JFK Jr. would have been working on a magazine or two ahead. Obviously, the issue that came after July of 1999 was the August issue with Ben Stiller on the cover, but I wanted to take a look at the September issue as well. And on the cover is Rob Lowe clutching pearls. One of the headlines on this issue is Janet Reno, who did an interview in this one, but she also did an interview in a previous George magazine as well. So I thought it was interesting she was interviewed twice in George magazine. The main thing I wanted to bring to you today was the letter from the editor that was written by his staff after the plane crash. So I wanted to read to you what they said about him in this issue. Here we go. Everyone who works at George has heard the question 100 times. Does he ever come into the office? We would respond with a mixture of courtesy because he was gracious and would expect the same of us, a little bit of humor because it was a funny question if you knew the truth, and a touch of frustration because he worked hard and made sacrifices for George. But we couldn't explain all that, so we would simply nod and say something like, he's in the office all the time. It's what he does. He, of course, was John Kennedy, and as we were completing work on this issue, we learned that John wouldn't be coming to the office anymore. John was the co-founder, editor-in-chief, and president of this magazine, but the confusion about his role was understandable because no one expects celebrities to hold day jobs. Truth is, John had a hand in every aspect of creating and producing George, the big picture and the daily details. Our editors and writers could talk about the stories he urged us to assign long before they were elsewhere in the news, about the insightful criticisms he would make after reading manuscripts, about how seriously he took his letter to George readers that ran on this page. Our designers and photographers knew that John brought a fresh eye to their work, challenging them to transform material usually presented in black and white into a colorful drama. And George's business staff and advertisers could discuss how committed he was to helping them sell this magazine. But those stories aren't really the point. For as much as we learned from John and loved working with him, he didn't create George for the fun of it. He edited George because the magazine manifested certain beliefs he wanted to promote. That there are good men and women in politics whose work is made harder because our political era fluctuates between scandal and alienation. That for all its imperfections, politics is a noble profession, and given his unique perspective on and place in the political world, he could make a difference by saying so. That much of the reason many people think ill of politics is the influence of all reflexively adversarial press. And most importantly, that a segment of the American public, a large segment, shares those beliefs and rejects cynicism. Politics is too important to be left to politicians, John liked to say. He didn't intend the remark to disparage politicians. He meant that the country would be better if more people were involved in its civic life. That's why he took such pride in the fact that George is the most popular political magazine in the country. It suggested that he was reaching people who have an open mind about politics, and that he was giving something back to a nation that had given much to him. Many of you have asked us how we plan to pay tribute to John in our pages. The answer is that we've left this issue of George as it was before John's death because it was the last one he edited. We'll devote much of our October issue to remembering him. We also wanted to thank all of you who have written, called, faxed, and emailed us with your condolences. Your kind thoughts have helped give us strength to carry on despite losing an irreplaceable colleague and friend. In the end, the greatest tribute that we can pay John is to continue putting out the finest magazine we can. We think he'd want it that way. The staff of George. Just a couple of insights from this letter. Number one, John was in the office. He really, truly cared about the success of George magazine. And he really, really cared about the success of the people that he worked with too. It wasn't just about a magazine, it was about the relationships that he made while working at George too. And clearly he had things that he wanted to put in George magazine, ideas that he wanted to promote. And this was interesting to me too, this sentence, that much of the reason many people think ill of politics is the influence of a reflexively adversarial press. Wow, I couldn't agree more with that statement. And isn't it funny to look back now from 2025 back to 1999 and see how true that statement is today. That does it for this episode of the George Collection. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time.
Of this extraordinary magazine, George, which is a hoot of a magazine. I thought you were a lawyer.
I was.
What happened?
Well, we decided, actually taking a cue from folks like yourself and you around the 1992 election, that there was an opportunity here to change the definition of a political magazine. Certainly the way Americans were accessing information about politics and politicians was changing. Candidates were appearing on late night talk shows, on talk radio, on sitcoms, and there was a kind of a leveling process, and while the rest of media clearly had caught up with that, we felt that political magazines per se hadn't.
Your mother was a hell of an editor at Doubleday.
That's what I hear.
Would she have liked George?
I think she would have.